What would you do if your rebellious teenage daughter was convinced the man helping you had bad intentions? Angela Brooks thought she had finally met someone kind after 12 years of loneliness. But her 18-year-old daughter, Maya, saw something completely different. She believed the younger man appearing in her mother's life was hiding a dangerous secret, so she followed him. She investigated him. She even risked everything to expose him. What Maya didn't know was that the man she distrusted most had been carrying a promise for 12 years. And before this story is over, a daughter will uncover a secret connected to her father's death. A hidden letter will change everything she thought she knew, and one family will discover that the truth is often very different from what it first appears to be. A cold drizzle hung over Seattle that Thursday morning, turning the city streets silver beneath the gray sky. Commuters hurried past coffee shops and bus stops, eager to escape the rain, while inside St. Michael's Medical Center, another long day was already beginning. Angela Brooks adjusted the collar of her navy blue nursing scrubs as she stepped out of the employee entrance shortly after sunrise. At 42, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent years caring for other people while ignoring her own exhaustion. Her dark brown skin showed the signs of countless overnight shifts, and faint lines around her warm eyes revealed a decade of sacrifice rather than age. Her shoulder-length black curls were pulled into a practical ponytail, and although patients often described her smile as comforting, few people saw it outside the hospital anymore. Life had become a routine of responsibility. 12 years earlier, Angela had buried her husband after a sudden construction accident that left her alone with a 6-year-old daughter and a mountain of uncertainty. Since then, every decision she made revolved around survival. She worked overtime, skipped vacations, and quietly gave up dreams she once held for herself. The years passed quickly. Her daughter grew older. The loneliness remained. That morning, Angela reached her aging Honda Civic and sighed when she noticed the rear tire was nearly flat. "Not today," she whispered. She checked her watch. Her shift started in less than 20 minutes. As she stared at the tire, wondering how she would solve yet another problem, a calm voice spoke from behind her. "Looks like you've had a rough morning." Angela turned. The man standing several feet away appeared to be in his mid-30s. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the relaxed confidence of someone comfortable in almost any situation. His light brown hair was neatly trimmed, and a short beard framed a strong jawline. His blue eyes seemed unusually attentive, the kind of eyes that notice details other people overlooked. He held a coffee cup in one hand and an umbrella in the other. "I'm Ethan," he said with an easy smile. "I parked next to you. Mind if I take a look?" Angela hesitated. Years of being a single mother had taught her caution. Still, she was late. "Only if you know what you're doing." Ethan chuckled softly. "Architect, not mechanic. But I grew up with 3 brothers. Flat tires were practically a family hobby." Against her better judgment, Angela laughed. 10 minutes later, Ethan had helped inflate the tire enough for her to safely reach a nearby repair shop. As she prepared to leave, he handed her the coffee. "You look like you needed this more than I do." Before she could refuse, he was already walking away through the rain. Angela sat inside her car for several moments. The gesture was simple, unexpectedly kind, and strangely difficult to stop thinking about. Across town, Maya Brooks sat in her first-period economics class pretending to take notes. At 18, Maya looked remarkably like her mother had at the same age. She had smooth dark skin, expressive brown eyes, and thick shoulder-length curls that seemed impossible to tame. Intelligent and stubborn, she possessed the fierce loyalty of someone who loved deeply but trusted very little, especially when it came to strangers. The past few years had been difficult. College applications, uncertainty about the future, and the lingering grief of losing a father she barely remembered had left her frustrated with the world. Most of all, she hated watching her mother work herself to exhaustion. Sometimes she felt angry without knowing exactly why. Sometimes that anger landed on the person closest to her, her mother. That evening, Angela mentioned the flat tire during dinner. "It wasn't a big deal," she said while setting plates on the table. Maya looked up. "Who helped you?" "A guy from the hospital parking lot." "What guy?" Angela shrugged. "Just someone being nice." Maya immediately narrowed her eyes. Nobody was just nice anymore. Not in her experience. Over the following weeks, Ethan appeared again and again and again. Sometimes Angela would mention running into him at a coffee shop near the hospital. Other times she would casually mention that he had helped carry groceries during a storm or driven her home after her car battery died following a late shift. The coincidences felt excessive. To Maya, they felt calculated. One Saturday afternoon, she looked out the apartment window and froze. A dark SUV was parked across the street. Inside sat Ethan. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was simply sitting there, watching. Maya's stomach tightened. The image stayed with her long after the vehicle drove away. That night she barely slept. Every possibility seemed worse than the last. Maybe he was a scammer. Maybe he wanted money. Maybe he had discovered something about her mother's finances. Maybe he was pretending to be kind until he gained her trust. The next morning she searched his name online. What she found only made her more suspicious. Ethan Carter was successful. Very successful. He owned part of an architectural firm that worked on major commercial projects throughout Washington state. He had no criminal record, no scandals, no obvious reason to pursue a relationship with a 42-year-old widowed nurse struggling to pay bills. That somehow bothered Maya even more. She couldn't explain why. Several days later, she spotted Ethan leaving a downtown office building carrying a worn leather briefcase. Without thinking, she followed him. The guilt arrived almost immediately, but concern overpowered it. For nearly an hour, she trailed him through Seattle traffic. Eventually, he entered a small cafe near the waterfront. Maya waited outside. Through the window, she watched him sit alone at a corner table. Then something caught her attention. He removed a large manila envelope from the briefcase. Unlike the expensive suit he wore, the envelope looked old, very old. The corners were worn, the paper slightly faded. Carefully, Ethan examined it before placing it back inside the briefcase. Maya's pulse quickened. When he stepped away to take a phone call outside, opportunity took over where judgment failed. She crossed the street. Moments later, she reached his vehicle. To her astonishment, the rear hatch wasn't fully latched. Just enough space remained for her to pull it open. Inside sat the leather briefcase. For several seconds she stared at it. This was wrong. She knew it, but something deeper pushed her forward. Her hands trembled as she opened the case. The envelope was exactly where she had seen it. Slowly she pulled it out. Then she saw the handwriting. Her breath stopped. Written across the front were words she recognized immediately. Angela Brooks. Below it was a date. September 15. The date felt familiar. Painfully familiar. Then realization struck. September 15 was the day her father died. Maya's heart began pounding so hard she could hear it. Why would a stranger possess an old envelope addressed to her mother and connected to her father's death? What was Ethan hiding? What had he been planning all this time? She carefully slid one finger beneath the envelope flap, just enough to open it, just enough to finally learn the truth. Then a calm voice sounded behind her. "I think you shouldn't open that." Every muscle in Maya's body froze. Slowly, she turned around. Ethan Carter stood only a few feet away, rain falling softly around him. His expression wasn't angry. It wasn't surprised. If anything, it looked disappointed. And somehow that frightened her far more. Because for the first time since she started following him, Maya realized Ethan might have known she was investigating him all along. Maya barely remembered driving home after the confrontation in the parking lot. The image of Ethan standing behind her replayed in her mind all night. What unsettled her wasn't that she had been caught. It was the look on his face. There had been no anger, no panic, no attempt to snatch the envelope away. If he were hiding something criminal, wouldn't he have reacted differently? Instead, he had simply taken the envelope from her hands and placed it back into his briefcase. "Someday you'll understand why this matters," he had said quietly. Then he left. Those words bothered Maya more than any threat could have. Over the next several weeks, her suspicion only grew. She began tracking Ethan's movements whenever she could. Between college preparations and her part-time job at a bookstore near Pike Place Market, she found herself spending far too much time thinking about a man she barely knew. One Tuesday afternoon, she spotted him entering a downtown law office. The building belonged to Harrison Vacole Legal Group, one of Seattle's most respected firms. Maya waited across the street. Nearly an hour later, Ethan emerged alongside an older attorney. The lawyer was a tall African-American man in his early 60s named Robert Harrison. His silver hair was cropped short, and his posture reflected decades of discipline and professionalism. People who knew him often described him as fair, patient, and impossible to intimidate. Robert handed Ethan a folder. The two men exchanged a few serious words before going their separate ways. Maya quickly photographed the interaction with her phone. Another piece of evidence, or so she believed. 3 days later, she followed Ethan again. This time he visited a local bank, not once, twice. The same branch, the same private offices, the same confidential meetings. Every detail strengthened Maya's theory that something involving money was happening behind the scenes. When she shared her concerns with her closest friend, Chloe Martinez, she expected support. Instead, Chloe looked unconvinced. At 18, Chloe was everything Maya was not. Outgoing, optimistic, and endlessly social, she had long dark hair, warm olive skin, and a tendency to see the best in people. Maybe he's just helping your mom, Chloe suggested. No one helps people like that for months. Some people do, not rich architects, Chloe sighed. Maya, you decided you hated this guy before you even knew him. The comment stung because part of her feared it might be true. Meanwhile, Angela's confusion was growing as well. She had never intended to become close to Ethan. Yet somehow he kept appearing during difficult moments. One evening, after a particularly exhausting hospital shift, they found themselves sharing coffee at a quiet cafe overlooking Elliott Bay. The conversation drifted from work to family. For a while, everything felt normal. Then Ethan casually mentioned her late husband. Angela froze. The smile disappeared from her face. Ethan, she said carefully, I've never talked about my husband with you. For the first time since they met, Ethan seemed uncomfortable. His eyes shifted toward the window. You mentioned him once. No, Angela replied. I'm sure I didn't. A heavy silence settled between them. Finally, Ethan stood. I'm sorry. Sorry for what? But he didn't answer. He simply paid for the coffee and left. Angela watched him disappear into the Seattle rain, feeling more unsettled than ever. That night, she called Maya into the kitchen. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I need to ask you something. Maya immediately sensed concern in her mother's voice. Have you ever told Ethan anything about your father? Maya shook her head. No. Angela sat down slowly. Then I don't understand how he knows things. The uncertainty in her mother's eyes frightened Maya. For years, Angela had been the steady one, the strong one, the person with answers. Now she looked genuinely worried. Over the following month, another detail emerged, a detail Maya couldn't explain. Twice she saw Ethan's vehicle parked near Greenwood Memorial Cemetery, the same cemetery where her father was buried. The first time she assumed it was coincidence. The second time she followed him. From a distance she watched Ethan walk through rows of headstones carrying a small bouquet of white lilies. He stopped at a specific grave, her father's grave. Maya felt her entire body go cold. She remained hidden behind a nearby tree. Ethan stood there for several minutes, not speaking, not moving, simply staring at the stone. Eventually he placed the flowers beside it and walked away. Maya waited until he disappeared. Then she approached. The flowers were fresh, expensive, recently purchased. Someone who cared had chosen them. The realization made no sense. Ethan had never met her father. At least that's what everyone believed. That evening, Maya confronted her mother. Angela listened carefully as Maya described what she had seen. The cemetery, the flowers, the visits. When she finished, neither woman spoke for several seconds. Finally, Angela whispered the question both were thinking, who is this man? The next week only deepened the mystery. Ethan continued helping Angela when opportunities arose. He remained kind, respectful, patient. Yet, whenever questions about the past surfaced, he immediately changed the subject. One rainy afternoon outside the hospital parking garage, Angela finally confronted him directly. No more vague answers. Ethan stopped walking. You deserve the truth, Angela said. Then tell me. For a moment, Maya thought he might finally explain everything. Instead, he looked at both women and slowly shook his head. Not yet. Angela's patience finally broke. Why? Ethan took a long breath. Because when the truth comes out, it changes more than you think. Neither woman understood what he meant. Before leaving, he added one final sentence. The date on that envelope exists for a reason. Then he walked away. Maya watched him disappear into the crowd. Something about his words felt less like a warning and more like a promise. Yet the unanswered questions continued multiplying. The lawyer, the bank visits, the cemetery, the envelope. And most troubling of all, Ethan seemed to know details about their family history that should have been impossible for a stranger to know. As Maya sat in her room that night studying old photographs of her father, she made a decision. Following Ethan wasn't enough anymore. If she wanted answers, she would need to investigate her father's past. Because for the first time, she wasn't sure the mystery began with Ethan Carter. She was beginning to suspect it began 12 years earlier, on the day her father died. The following Saturday morning, Seattle woke beneath a blanket of low clouds and steady rain. Maya sat alone at the dining table, surrounded by old family photographs, yellowed documents, and a notebook filled with questions that seemed to multiply every day. For nearly a month, she had focused entirely on Ethan Carter. Now she was beginning to wonder if she had been looking in the wrong direction. The answer, she suspected, might not be hiding in Ethan's life at all. It might be buried in her father's. Her father, Marcus Brooks, had died 12 years earlier in what everyone had always described as a tragic construction accident. Maya had been too young to understand the details at the time. All she remembered was her mother's tears, the crowded funeral, and a feeling that life had suddenly become much quieter. Angela rarely spoke about those days, not because she wanted to hide anything. The memories simply hurt too much. That morning, Maya opened an old storage box she had found in the apartment closet. Inside were tax records, family photographs, insurance papers, and several employment documents belonging to Marcus. One paper immediately caught her attention. A company logo, Northridge Development Group. Maya froze. She had seen that name before. The previous week, while researching Ethan online, she had discovered that his first job after college had been with a construction company connected to Northridge Development. Her pulse quickened. For the first time, there was a direct connection, not between Ethan and Angela, between Ethan and her father. The discovery sent her downtown that same afternoon. The Seattle Public Records Archive occupied an aging brick building near the courthouse. It wasn't glamorous, but it contained decades of permits, employment filings, and corporate records. Maya spent hours digging through documents. Eventually, she found what she was looking for. Marcus Brooks had indeed worked for Northridge Development during the final year of his life. Even more surprising, Ethan Carter's name appeared in several project files from the same period. Not as an architect, as a junior engineering intern. The dates overlapped perfectly. Maya stared at the documents. Her father and Ethan had known each other, or at least they had worked at the same construction site. The realization sent a chill through her. Why had Ethan never mentioned it? Why hide something so simple? As she continued searching, another name appeared repeatedly throughout the records. Thomas Reed, project manager, site supervisor, witness. The name surfaced again and again in reports connected to the accident that killed Marcus. Maya copied everything she could find. By the time she left the archive, darkness had settled over the city. She barely noticed someone watching her from across the street. The man remained inside a parked sedan, waiting, observing. The following evening, Maya decided to visit the old construction site. Most of the property had long since been redeveloped into office buildings and retail space. Only a few original structures remained. As she walked along the perimeter fence, she noticed an elderly security guard standing near a maintenance entrance. His name tag read Harold. Harold was a thin white man in his 70s with weathered skin, gray eyebrows, and the cautious eyes of someone who had spent decades working night shifts. Years of solitude had made him observant. Maya showed him an old photograph of her father. To her surprise, Harold recognized him immediately. "Marcus Brooks," he said. "You knew him?" Harold nodded slowly. "Good man." The answer came without hesitation. "What happened to him?" The old man's expression changed. The warmth disappeared. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he quietly handed back the photograph. "Some things are better left alone, miss." Maya's stomach tightened. What does that mean? But Harold simply walked away. That night she couldn't stop thinking about his reaction. The fear in his eyes had been real, not imagined, not exaggerated. Fear. The next morning things became even stranger. As Maya exited the bookstore after work, she noticed a man leaning against a black pickup truck across the street. He appeared to be in his late 50s, tall, broad-shouldered. His dark coat hung heavily from his frame, and a thick gray beard covered much of his face. A scar stretched from his left cheek toward his jawline. The man wasn't trying to hide. He was clearly waiting for her. Maya considered walking away. Instead, she crossed the street. "Can I help you?" The stranger studied her carefully. His expression was neither hostile nor friendly, only serious. "You've been asking questions." The words immediately put her on edge. "Who are you?" "My name doesn't matter. It matters to me." The man ignored the comment. "You need to stop looking into your father's accident." Every nerve in Maya's body tightened. "Why?" The stranger glanced around before answering. "Because some stories don't stay buried by accident." The words landed like ice. Maya felt her heartbeat accelerate. "What are you talking about?" The man sighed. For the first time she noticed genuine concern in his eyes, not threat, concern. 12 years ago people got hurt. My father died." The man nodded. "Yes, then I deserve answers." A long silence followed. Finally he stepped closer. "Maybe you do." His voice lowered. "But if you keep digging, you're going to find people who don't want those answers uncovered." Maya stared at him. "Who?" The man shook his head. "I'm already saying too much." Before leaving, he offered one final warning. "Some secrets cost more than you think." Then he climbed into the pickup truck and drove away. Maya remained frozen on the sidewalk. The encounter lasted less than 5 minutes, yet it changed everything. For weeks she had convinced herself this was about money, inheritance, property, maybe some hidden financial scheme. Now she wasn't so sure. Fear like that didn't come from an inheritance dispute. Fear like that came from something much bigger. That evening she spread her documents across her bedroom floor. The accident reports, the employment records, the photographs, the names. For the first time, a disturbing possibility entered her mind. What if her father's death hadn't been as simple as everyone believed? And if Ethan had known her father all those years ago, what exactly had he been protecting? As rain tapped softly against the apartment window, Maya realized she had crossed a line she could no longer uncross. The mystery wasn't about Ethan anymore. It wasn't even about the envelope. Somewhere in the past, hidden beneath 12 years of silence, lay a truth powerful enough to frighten strangers, silence witnesses, and keep secrets alive long after a man was buried. And Maya had just taken her first real step toward uncovering it. For the first time since beginning her investigation, Maya Brooks felt afraid. Not the ordinary kind of fear that came before exams or difficult conversations. This was different. Someone had approached her. Someone who clearly knew about her father's death, and someone wanted her to stop asking questions. 3 days passed without incident, but the uneasy feeling never left. Maya found herself checking over her shoulder while walking to work, glancing twice at unfamiliar cars parked near the apartment, and sleeping with her phone beside her pillow. Meanwhile, Angela noticed the change immediately. Years of nursing had taught her to recognize anxiety in people, especially in her daughter. One evening after dinner, she finally confronted her. "Maya, what's going on?" Maya hesitated. She had hidden most of the investigation from her mother. At first, it was about protecting her. Now she wasn't so sure. Carefully, she explained everything. The company records, the old construction site, the warning from the stranger, the connection between Ethan and her father. As Angela listened, her face slowly lost color. By the end of the conversation, she looked shaken. Not because she doubted Maya, because certain details were beginning to awaken memories she had spent years trying to forget. "There was something strange after your father's accident," she admitted quietly. Maya looked up. "What do you mean?" Angela stared at the rain sliding down the apartment window. "About a week after the funeral, someone came to our apartment asking questions." Maya frowned. "Who?" "I never learned his name." Angela took a slow breath. "He claimed he worked for the construction company. What did he want?" "He kept asking whether Marcus had left any documents at home." Maya felt her heartbeat quicken. "What kind of documents?" "He wouldn't say." Angela looked down at her hands. "At the time, I thought it was just paperwork related to the accident." Now she wasn't so sure. That conversation lingered in Maya's mind for days. Then unexpectedly, a breakthrough arrived. Late Friday afternoon, an anonymous package appeared at the bookstore where she worked. No return address, no note. Only her name written on the front. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside were photocopies of old documents, construction reports, safety inspections, internal company correspondence. Most appeared ordinary, until she reached the final pages. There, attached with a paperclip, was a handwritten note. The handwriting belonged to her father. There was no mistaking it. She had seen birthday cards and family letters written by him throughout her childhood. The message was brief. "If anything happens to me, the truth is inside Project Falcon." Below the sentence was a signature, Marcus Brooks. Maya stared at the page in disbelief. Project Falcon. She had never heard the name before, yet somehow she knew it was important. Very important. That evening she rushed home and showed Angela. For several moments her mother simply stared at the note. Tears slowly filled her eyes. "It's his handwriting," Angela whispered. The room fell silent. For 12 years they had believed Marcus died in a tragic accident. Now evidence suggested he may have known something was wrong before he died. But before they could investigate further, trouble arrived. 2 nights later, Maya woke shortly after midnight. A strange sound echoed from the living room. A drawer opening, then another. She sat upright. Every nerve in her body went tense. Someone was inside the apartment. Quietly, she stepped into the hallway. A shadow moved near the dining table. Another figure stood beside the bookshelf. Both wore dark clothing. Neither belonged there. Maya's pulse exploded. "Mom!" The shout shattered the silence. The intruders immediately reacted. One grabbed a folder from the table. The other moved toward the front door. Within seconds, they vanished into the night. Angela emerged from her bedroom, terrified but unharmed. The police arrived shortly afterward. Unfortunately, little evidence remained. The intruders had worn gloves. Security cameras in the apartment building captured only partial images. The officers promised to investigate, but Maya sensed they weren't optimistic. Someone had specifically targeted the documents. Nothing else had been stolen. Not money, not electronics, only the files connected to her father's past. The realization was impossible to ignore. Someone else knew about Project Falcon, and someone was desperate to keep it hidden. The following morning brought another surprise. As Maya and Angela left the apartment building, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Maya immediately recognized the driver, Ethan Carter. Before either woman could speak, Ethan stepped out. His expression was unusually serious. "What happened last night?" Maya froze. "How do you know about that?" Ethan ignored the question. "Are either of you hurt?" Angela stared at him. "No." Relief flashed across his face. For the first time, Maya noticed genuine concern rather than mystery. Not suspicion, not calculation. Concern. Ethan looked around carefully before lowering his voice. "Listen to me." Neither woman interrupted. "Until this situation is resolved, you shouldn't be alone." Maya crossed her arms. "Why?" "Because the people looking for those documents are becoming desperate." The statement hit both women hard. He knew. He knew exactly what was happening. "Who are they?" Maya demanded. Ethan's jaw tightened. "I can't answer that." "Why not?" "Because right now, the less you know, the safer you are." Maya almost laughed in frustration. The answer sounded ridiculous. Yet after the break-in, it no longer felt completely impossible. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then something unexpected happened. A police cruiser entered the parking lot. The officer behind the wheel stepped out and approached. Officer Lisa Grant was a woman in her early 40s with short blonde hair and a calm, professional demeanor. She had spent nearly 2 decades in law enforcement and possessed the steady confidence of someone who remained calm under pressure. "We recovered something," she said. Everyone immediately turned toward her. "What?" Maya asked. Lisa handed over a small evidence bag. Inside was a flash drive. It was dropped near the rear staircase by one of the suspects. Maya stared at it. The tiny device suddenly felt heavier than it should, potentially more important than every document she had uncovered so far. As Officer Grant walked away, Ethan's eyes remained fixed on the flash drive. For the first time since meeting him, Maya saw fear. Real fear, not for himself, for them. And in that moment, a possibility entered her mind that she had resisted for months. Maybe Ethan wasn't hiding the truth from them because he was guilty. Maybe he was hiding it because he had been protecting them all along. But if that was true, then whatever waited inside Project Falcon had to be far more dangerous than she ever imagined. September 15 arrived beneath a sky as gray as the one that had hung over Seattle 12 years earlier. For Angela Brooks, the date had always been difficult. Every year she took the day off from work. Every year she visited the cemetery. Every year she returned home carrying the same mixture of grief, gratitude, and unanswered questions. This year felt different. Too many secrets had surfaced. Too many pieces no longer fit together. By late afternoon, Angela and Maya sat quietly in their apartment while rain tapped softly against the windows. Neither woman spoke much. Both were thinking about Marcus, both were waiting. Shortly after 6 o'clock, a knock came at the door. When Angela opened it, Ethan Carter stood outside holding the same worn leather briefcase Maya had first seen months earlier. The sight of it immediately brought back memories of suspicion, arguments, and unanswered questions. Today, however, felt different. Ethan looked exhausted. The burden he had carried for years seemed visible in his face. The three of them sat together at the dining table. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then Ethan slowly placed the briefcase in front of him. "I think it's finally time." Maya's heart began racing. Ethan opened the case and carefully removed the old envelope. The same envelope. The one addressed to Angela. The one dated September 15. The one he had protected for more than a decade. This time, he handed it directly to her. Angela stared at the familiar handwriting on the front. Her hands trembled. She recognized it instantly. Marcus. For several seconds, she couldn't bring herself to open it. Then, finally, she broke the seal. Inside was a letter, several pages long, written in Marcus Brooks's unmistakable handwriting. As Angela began reading, tears immediately filled her eyes. The room remained silent except for the sound of rain outside. Halfway through the letter, her voice broke. "Maya," she whispered, "you need to hear this too." Slowly, she began reading aloud. The letter explained that 12 years earlier, Marcus had been working on a major construction project known internally as Project Falcon. Months before his death, he had discovered serious safety violations that were being ignored by senior management. Marcus had documented everything. The files Maya had been searching for were real. The danger had been real, and the people involved had spent years trying to ensure those documents never resurfaced. But that wasn't the most important part of the letter. The next pages revealed something neither Angela nor Maya had expected. A young engineering intern had been working on the site during the final months before the accident. His name was Ethan Carter. At the time, Ethan had been only 23 years old, fresh out of college, ambitious, inexperienced, and completely unaware of how dangerous the situation had become. One afternoon, a structural failure triggered a catastrophic collapse. Marcus had seen it happening seconds before everyone else. According to the letter, he pushed Ethan out of the way. The younger man survived. Marcus did not. Tears rolled down Maya's cheeks as Angela continued reading. The room felt impossibly still. For years she had imagined her father's final moments. Never once had she imagined this. The final page contained a personal message. Not to Maya, not to Ethan, to Angela. The words were simple. Marcus wrote about the life they had built together. He wrote about watching Maya grow. He wrote about knowing that he might never see his daughter become an adult. Most of all, he wrote about Angela. He told her he loved her, that he always would. But he also asked something of her. Something she had unknowingly refused herself for 12 years. Don't spend the rest of your life alone. The sentence hit Angela harder than anything else in the letter. For over a decade, she had devoted herself entirely to work and motherhood. Every dream, every possibility, every relationship, she had quietly buried them beside her husband. Now, hearing his words, she realized how much of her own life she had stopped living. When the reading ended, nobody spoke for a long time. Eventually, Maya turned toward Ethan. For the first time since meeting him, she truly saw him, not as a suspect, not as a threat, but as a man carrying an enormous responsibility. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" she asked softly. Ethan looked down. "Because I promised him I wouldn't." Angela wiped away tears. "What exactly did he ask you to do?" Ethan took a deep breath. Marcus knew he might not survive. His voice remained steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "He gave me that letter in the hospital." Maya listened carefully. "He told me there would come a day when you were ready to move forward." He looked toward Angela. "He said I would know when the time was right." "And you waited 12 years? Ethan nodded. Every year he had visited Marcus's grave. Every year he had checked on the family from a distance. Every year he had honored the promise. Not because he expected anything in return, because he believed Marcus deserved that loyalty. Maya suddenly understood why Ethan knew so much, why he visited the cemetery, why he protected the envelope, why he had remained silent despite the accusations. The answer had never been greed. It had never been manipulation. It had been loyalty. Weeks later, the investigation surrounding Project Falcon finally concluded. Most of the individuals involved had long since retired or left the industry. The recovered evidence, including the files found on the flash drive, confirmed Marcus's concerns and officially cleared lingering questions surrounding the accident. For Angela, however, the greatest gift was not closure. It was peace, the kind she had not felt in many years. Over the following months, she and Ethan spent more time together. There was no dramatic romance, no grand declarations, only friendship, trust, shared conversations, and the slow beginning of something neither had expected. Maya noticed the difference almost immediately. Her mother laughed more often, smiled more easily, looked lighter somehow. One spring afternoon, nearly a year later, Maya watched Angela and Ethan walking together along the Seattle waterfront. The wind lifted her mother's curls as she laughed at something Ethan had said. For the first time in many years, she looked genuinely happy. Maya smiled. Her father had been right. Some promises were not meant to hold people in the past. Some promises were meant to help them find their future. And sometimes the person we fear the most is actually the person carrying the greatest act of kindness we have never seen.